Dear friends, I need to share something close to my heart. Last spring at our church fellowship, a retired nurse told me this story that's stayed with me ever since. It's about a librarian named Margaret Walsh, who reminded me of so many of us, spending decades caring for others while hiding our own struggles. You know how we were raised. Don't complain, don't burden others, keep your troubles to yourself. That's what our parents taught us during the Depression. What we learned was strength. But Margaret discovered, as I have in my 78 years, that there's a difference between being strong and being alone. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let people see us as we truly are. I'm sharing Margaret's story because right now, someone reading this might be sitting in their favorite chair, hiding their own pain, thinking they're protecting their loved ones. This story is for you. Margaret Walsh gripped her teacup with both hands, steadying the tremor that had gotten worse since breakfast. The bone china, part of her wedding set from Carson's department store back in 1979, rattled against the saucer like dice in a cup. Across from her, in Frank's old reading chair with the worn armrests, her granddaughter Emma sat with a thick purple binder spread open on her lap. Papers covered the coffee table that Frank had built in his workshop 30 years ago. Yellow highlighter marks everywhere. Little slips of paper with Emma's careful handwriting. Tabs labeled with medical words Margaret had only typed into the computer late at night, immediately erasing what she'd searched for. "Grandma, I know about the HS." The words hung there like laundry on a still day. 4 words. Margaret had kept this secret for 2 years, through Sunday dinners and church suppers, through Christmas and Easter. Now it was over. The teacup slipped. Hot Earl Grey, Frank's brand, Twinings, which he'd discovered during his Navy days, splashed across her lap, soaking through her black slacks. Always black now, never the pretty florals she used to wear. She didn't move to clean it. Her right arm stayed pressed against her ribs, protecting the worst spot, the one that had kept her walking the floors until dawn. Emma was already reaching for the napkins, but Margaret waved her off with her left hand. "How long have you known?" Margaret's voice came out like it did after crying at Frank's funeral, thin and strange. Emma turns to a tab marked Timeline in neat printing. "Since Thanksgiving, when you stopped hugging anyone, when Mother mentioned you'd missed 3 Sunday dinners in a row, and you never miss Sunday dinner." The page showed dates and observations, like a detective's notebook from those old Columbo shows Frank loved. November 3rd. Grandma flinched when Mom hugged her after service. November 15th. Medical supplies under the Davenport. Gauze, peroxide, tape. November 22nd. Thanksgiving. Used tongs for everything. Wouldn't lift her arms. December 20th. Canceled Christmas for first time since 1965. Margaret's breath caught. "You've been watching me like a hawk." Somebody had to. Emma's voice had that determined tone, same as Frank's when he'd decided something needed fixing. "You weren't going to ask for help, were you?" Emma flipped to another section. The page showed printed computer pages from support groups, meeting schedules with times and addresses, photographs of ladies their age smiling at cameras, wearing short sleeves that showed surgical scars they weren't hiding. "This group meets at the Elmhurst Library," Emma said, her finger trailing down the page. 20 minutes down Route 83. The lady who runs it is 71, Dorothy Williams. I telephoned her last week." "You telephoned her?" "She said she hid her condition for 8 years before getting proper help. 8 years of suffering alone." Emma turned to another tab. Doctors. Names, specialties, which insurance they took. Stars next to certain ones. At the top, circled 3 times in red ink. Dr. Patricia Morrison, Northwestern Memorial. Specializes in helping older folks with skin conditions. "I made you an appointment. Monday morning, 9:30. I'll drive." Margaret stared at this binder, this collection of love made visible. Every page represented hours Emma had spent after her nursing classes, researching like she was back in the library where Margaret had worked 40 years. "Grandma?" Emma whispered, and Margaret saw tears her granddaughter had been holding back like water behind a dam. "Do you understand we almost lost you?" The binder slid off Emma's lap as she knelt beside Margaret's chair, careful not to touch where it hurt. "But to understand how we got here," Margaret heard herself saying, "I need to go back to when this started. To the day we buried Frank, 2 years ago this November." Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. 6 months earlier, Labor Day weekend, the thermometer Frank had nailed to the deck post read 87 degrees. Margaret stood at her kitchen counter, both hands gripping the bottom of the Pyrex bowl that held Frank's potato salad recipe, the one his mother had taught her in 1982, written on an index card now yellowed and splattered with 40 years of summer picnics. The weight of the bowl pulled at her shoulders. She kept her elbows locked tight against her ribs. Lift with the legs, not the arms. That's what the physical therapy lady had said after Frank's first stroke. But this wasn't about proper lifting. This was about the burning that started 3 weeks ago, living under her right arm like a hot coal pressed against her skin. Through the kitchen window with the cafe curtains she'd sewn during Reagan's first term, she watched Michael setting up the card tables in the backyard. Her son moved just like Frank used to. No wasted motion, everything deliberate. He glanced toward the house. Margaret forced her mouth into a smile. Normal. Everything had to look normal. The black cotton blouse was already damp with perspiration. The cardigan over it, also black, ordered from the Pennies catalog, added another layer in this heat. But black didn't show things. Black was safe. "Mother, you need help?" Susan's voice came from the doorway. Margaret didn't turn. Turning meant twisting, and twisting meant the fabric might pull against the raw spot that had opened up 3 days ago, the one that wept like a broken faucet. "Everything's under control." Susan stepped into view, studying her. "You're dressed for October, not Labor Day." "Sun bothers my skin now." The lie came smooth as butter on warm bread. "Dr. Hartley says it's common after 65. "Which Dr. Hartley? The one who retired?" Margaret slid the bowl along the counter with a controlled push. "Everyone's arriving. Would you take this out?" Susan lifted the bowl one-handed, casual as picking up the mail. "Mother, that grief counselor from church, Susan. You haven't been yourself since Daddy. The mayonnaise will spoil in this heat." Susan's mouth tightened the same way it did when she was 16, and Margaret wouldn't let her go to the drive-in with that Wilson boy. But she carried the bowl outside. Margaret gripped the Formica counter edge. The folded paper towels she'd tucked inside her brassiere on the right side were already soaked through. She had extras in her pocket, but changing them meant going to the bathroom, and Emma had just pulled up in that little Japanese car of hers. She watched through the window as her family gathered around the picnic table Frank had built. Michael's boys tossing a football, Susan's husband manning the Weber grill, Emma helping with plates, her nursing textbooks visible in her canvas tote. Margaret reached for the hamburger buns from the Jewel, and that's when she felt it. Warm wetness starting under her right arm, soaking through the paper towel barrier, heading toward the black fabric that wouldn't show the stain. The CVS pharmacy line stretched back to the shampoo aisle. Margaret stood third from the counter, prescription bag crumpled in her left hand. Behind her, she caught a whiff of White Diamond's perfume, strong enough to mask the Ben Gay and pharmacy disinfectant. "Margaret, haven't seen you at book club since August." Janet Morrison from Maple Street, with Barbara Chen and Dorothy Vance flanking her like bookends. The Tuesday afternoon book club ladies, all waiting for their medications like it was social hour at the church basement. Margaret shifted her weight, keeping her right arm pressed tight against her body. The new prescription burned in her hand. Dr. Hartley had written it after barely glancing at the single spot she'd been willing to show him. "Just a boil," he'd said. The same thing doctors had been saying since Roosevelt was president. Common in mature patients. The young pharmacist, his name tag read Tyler, in cheerful letters, waved her forward. 25 at most, with that eager helpfulness they must teach in pharmacy school these days. "Mrs. Walsh, clindamycin 300 milligrams." His voice carried over the muzak playing Tony Bennett. "Any allergies we should know about?" Janet leaned forward. Barbara's eyes tracked to the prescription bag. "No allergies." Margaret reached with her left hand only, the motion requiring her to twist her whole torso. The movement pulled at the gauze under her blouse, the medical tape catching on raw skin. Tyler kept reading from his computer screen. "The doctor noted this is for a skin infection. You'll want to keep the area clean and dry. Change any dressings twice daily. If you notice increased redness, swelling, or fever, I understand." Margaret grabbed the white bag. The paper crackled loud as cellophane. "The antibiotic can cause stomach upset. Take it with food. Some crackers or—" She was already walking past Janet's raised eyebrows, past Barbara's concerned expression, past Dorothy's hand reaching out like she wanted to pat Margaret's shoulder. In her Oldsmobile, Margaret pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. The vinyl was hot from the September sun, but that burn felt clean compared to the sick heat radiating from under her arm. At home, Frank's old Dell computer sat on the kitchen table where he used to do the bills. She opened a private browsing window. Emma had shown her how for Christmas shopping back when she still shopped. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard, then typed hidradenitis suppurativa stages. The images loaded slowly on their DSL connection. Stage 1. Single boil-like bumps. Stage 2. Multiple bumps with scarring. Stage 3. Extensive tunneling, tracks under the skin connecting like subway routes. She lifted her blouse in the powder room mirror, angling to see. The resemblance to the Stage 3 images made her stomach turn. The puckered skin, dark tracks spreading like tree roots, healthy tissue turned battlefield. Her flip phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Those cost 25 cents each on her plan. "Lunch tomorrow?" Margaret typed with her thumb. "Busy, sorry." Then deleted each letter. Started again. "Not feeling great." The response came quick. "I'll bring soup." "No!" She hit send too fast. Added quickly. "Don't want you catching anything." 3 dots appeared and disappeared on the tiny screen. Finally, "Okay, Grandma. Love you." That evening, Margaret found Emma's computer page. Instagram, the photo-sharing thing. She never commented, didn't understand the rules, but liked seeing her granddaughter's life in little squares. The latest post stopped her cold. From 5 hours ago. "Worried about someone, but they won't let me in. How do you help someone who won't admit they need help?" 47 comments underneath. Margaret put on her reading glasses, squinting at the small print. Nursing students offering advice, professors sharing wisdom. And there, buried in the middle, Emma's reply to someone. "It's my grandmother. Something's wrong, but she won't tell anyone." Margaret stared at the screen. Emma knew. Not the specifics, maybe, but she knew something was terribly wrong. The waiting room clock at Northwestern Memorial showed 2:47 a.m., one of those big institutional clocks with a red second hand that jumped rather than swept. Margaret filled out the intake form left-handed, her Palmer method cursive shaky on the clipboard. Each pen stroke pulled at the muscles in her shoulder, already cramped from holding the same position during the drive down Interstate 94. November 15th. The date stared up at her from the paperwork. 2 years exactly since she'd signed different forms in this same hospital, in the cardiac unit 3 floors up. Same fluorescent lights humming like the ballast was going bad. Same smell of floor wax and disinfectant that probably hadn't changed since the 70s. Lawson? A resident who looked younger than Emma's boyfriend stood in the doorway, tablet computer in hand, green scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. Walsh. Her voice came out rough from not talking since yesterday. "It's Margaret Walsh." "Right, sorry." He didn't look up from his screen, just turned and walked. "What brings you in tonight, Mrs. Walsh?" She followed him down the hallway, past rooms with curtains half drawn, past an old man on a gurney, past the nurse's station where nobody looked up. I have an infection. It's getting worse. The exam room had that paper on the table that doctors had been using since she was young. It crinkled as she struggled to sit without raising her arms. The resident, his badge said Dr. Ryan Miller, resident physician, kept his eyes on the tablet. Where's the infection? Under my arm, right side, but there's more. How long? The lie was ready, practiced in the car. A few weeks. Let's take a look. Margaret unbuttoned the top 3 buttons of her black blouse, the polyester one from Kohl's that didn't show stains. She pulled the fabric aside just enough to reveal the smallest spot, the one that looked most like what he expected to see. Not the spreading darkness below, not the tunneling that had started connecting to her back, just the one manageable-looking spot. Dr. Miller glanced for maybe 3 seconds, already typing. Boil, common in older patients. Obesity can exacerbate these conditions. The scale in triage had shown 142 pounds, down from 160 last Christmas, down from 165 when Frank was alive. There's more than one spot. If you look, the antibiotics will clear it up. Clindamycin not working? It's not helping. The infection is... We'll try doxycycline, stronger. His fingers flew across the screen like Emma's when she was texting. Lose some weight. Keep the area clean and dry. Follow up with your primary care physician if it doesn't improve in 2 weeks. He was already moving toward the door. Doctor, I think this might be something called, the discharge nurse will bring your paperwork. The door swung shut with that soft whoosh they all made. In the hospital bathroom, Margaret locked the door and lifted her blouse completely. The fluorescent light, harsh as Judgment Day, revealed everything. Angry patches spreading across her ribs like spilled wine on a tablecloth. Skin puckered and tunneling in ways that made her think of the gopher holes Frank used to curse in the backyard. The drainage had soaked through 3 layers of gauze since midnight. She pulled out her flip phone, held it at arm's length, pressed the camera button. The image on the tiny screen looked like something from those medical books at the library, the ones they kept in the reference section. Her thumb hovered over save, then pressed delete. No evidence, no proof of how bad she'd let this get. The drive home took her down Irving Park, past Bohemian National Cemetery. Frank's headstone would be covered in frost by now. She'd promised to bring chrysanthemums today, the bronze ones he'd planted by the garage. Another broken promise to add to the list. At 5 a.m., she sat in Frank's lazy boy, still wearing her coat. The prescription bag from the hospital sat unopened on the TV tray. Doxycycline, another antibiotic that wouldn't touch what was really happening under her skin, spreading like secrets. Her phone rang at exactly 7 a.m., Emma's name on the caller ID. Mother said you weren't at grief group yesterday. I was tired. Grandma, Emma's voice had that weight to it, like when she'd called about changing her major to nursing. That's 3 meetings you've missed. I needed rest. Are you sick? Mom thinks you're depressed. Emma. Margaret pressed her left hand against her eyes, felt the wedding ring catch on her eyebrow. I just need some space. Please. The silence stretched between them. Margaret could hear Emma breathing, could picture her in that cramped dorm room, surrounded by those big medical textbooks, trying to solve a problem she couldn't name. Okay, Emma finally said. But I'm here, whenever you're ready. After hanging up, Margaret noticed something on the coffee table that hadn't been there before she left for the hospital. A medical journal, the kind with the serious covers. A yellow sticky note on top in Emma's neat printing. Thought you might find this interesting. M. The journal was open to page 47, an article about hidradenitis suppurativa in older women, highlighted in yellow, often misdiagnosed for years as recurrent boils. Margaret held the phone between her shoulder and left ear, her good hand gripping the kitchen counter for balance. December 20th, 10 in the morning. Outside the kitchen window, snow covered Frank's tomato stakes that she'd never pulled from the garden. Mother, you're seriously canceling Christmas? Susan's voice climbed higher with each word, reminding Margaret of when Susan was 13 and didn't get invited to Jennifer Patterson's birthday party. I can't host this year. But we always come to your house. The kids have been talking about Grandma's Christmas cookies since Halloween. Tommy even made you an ornament in school. Margaret's right side throbbed with her heartbeat. 1, 2, 1, 2, like the metronome from her piano lesson days. The drainage had started at 4 a.m., soaking through the overnight dressing she'd applied after watching the 10 o'clock news. Have Christmas at your house this year. Mother. Susan's exhale made the phone speaker crackle. Is this about Daddy? Because it's been 2 years, and Mrs. Henderson from church, the one who lost Harold, she says her grief counselor, it's not about Frank. Then what? You missed Thanksgiving. You were at Emma's birthday for 20 minutes wearing that same black cardigan when I had the heat set to 75. Margaret's free hand moved to her right side, pressing against the fresh gauze she'd taped there an hour ago, already damp. The tape was pulling at the good skin, making everything hurt worse. The kids will be heartbroken, Susan continued. They love Grandma's Christmas. The sugar cookies with the colored frosting, opening presents under your big spruce tree. I'm sorry. Mother, what's really going on? And don't say you're tired. The question hung there like icicles on the gutter. Margaret could taste the truth, metallic like the antibiotics that weren't working, bitter like the Pepto-Bismol she took for the stomach upset they caused. I need to rest, that's all. After Susan hung up, no goodbye, just that disappointed silence, Margaret stood in front of her bedroom closet. 23 black blouses hung there like a funeral procession. The tags from the newest ones, ordered from the JCPenney catalog, still dangled from the sleeves. On the bed sat a UPS package, Emma's return address in Evanston, her dorm building. Margaret cut it open with Frank's old pocket knife, careful not to lift her arms. Inside, a Christmas sweater, bright cardinal red with white snowflakes, soft as lamb's wool. The card in Emma's handwriting. For Christmas dinner. Can't wait to see you wear it. Love, M. Margaret held it up to the bedroom light. Beautiful. Festive. Impossible. Blood would show on red. Drainage would stain those white snowflakes yellow within an hour. The soft wool would catch on the rough patches, pull at the raw spots. She folded it carefully, placed it in the Salvation Army pile growing in Frank's study. Christmas Eve, 9 o'clock. Margaret sat on the kitchen floor, wrapping paper spread around her like she was young again, wrapping presents while Dick Van Dyke sang carols on the hi-fi. Emma's gift, a first edition Virginia Woolf from the estate sale at the Riverside house, lay in tissue paper. She tried to lift both arms to tie the ribbon. Pain shot from her armpit down to her hip, electric and immediate. The book slipped from her grip, skidded across the linoleum Frank had installed in '92, disappeared under the kitchen table where they'd eaten 10,000 meals. Margaret stayed on the floor. The linoleum was cold through her house dress. Her breathing came in short puffs, the way it did when she'd climbed stairs too fast at the library. The grandfather clock Frank had inherited from his mother chimed 10 times. She crawled to retrieve the book. The movement made the tunneling areas pull and tear. Something warm ran down her ribs, pooling at the elastic of her slip. Her old Dell computer sat on the kitchen table, still open from morning. She pulled herself up using the chair, typed one-handed. Hidradenitis suppurativa, stage 3, life expectancy. The results loaded slow as molasses. She read the first 3 links, then closed the laptop hard enough to rattle Frank's coffee mug, still sitting where he'd left it. Her phone showed 17 unread emails from the HS support group she'd almost joined after finding it in November. Subject lines filled the tiny screen. You're not alone. Holiday coping strategies. My HS journey. There is hope. She selected all 17. Her thumb moved to the delete button. Then she saw one at the bottom, sent 3 hours ago. From Emma. Subject line, please read this, Grandma. The preview showed the first line. I know you're hurting. and I know why. The deadbolt turned with that little click Frank had never gotten around to oiling. Margaret heard it from the bedroom, Emma's key in the lock, the one she'd given her 3 Christmases ago for emergencies. 10 in the morning, January 15th, Martin Luther King Day. The college was closed. Margaret stood beside the bed, left hand clutching the corner of the fitted sheet. The elastic had snapped back twice already, leaving the mattress corner bare. Her right arm hung at her side like a dead branch, the morning's flare-up progressing from burning to that deep electric pain that shot down to her fingertips. "Grandma?" Emma's footsteps on the hardwood Frank had refinished in '88, getting closer. Margaret's nightgown, the flannel one from Sears, was soaked through on the right side. No time to change. Emma appeared in the doorway, jeans and her Northwestern nursing sweatshirt, dark hair pulled back with one of those elastic bands. Her eyes took it in. Margaret's awkward stance, the half-made bed, the pile of laundry on Frank's side that had been there since Tuesday. "Let me help." Emma moved to the opposite side of the bed, grabbed the dangling sheet corner. "I can manage. I know." Emma pulled the sheet tight, tucked it under with those quick movements they must teach in nursing school. "But you don't have to." They worked without talking. Emma stripped the old sheets, bundled them into the hamper Margaret kept in the closet. Her granddaughter's eyes tracked across the mattress pad, the yellowish stains near the edge, the small, rust-colored spot that looked like dried blood. Emma said nothing, just pulled fresh sheets from the linen closet, the ones that smelled like the downy April Fresh Margaret had used since the '80s. In the kitchen, Emma unpacked her book bag onto the Formica table. Medical textbooks thick as phone books, her laptop computer, a thermos that smelled like that expensive coffee from the place near campus. "I'm doing a presentation tomorrow," Emma said, opening the computer. The screen lit up bright. "Autoimmune conditions. Want to see?" Before Margaret could answer, the screen filled with one of those slideshow presentations. Big letters across the top. Hidradenitis suppurativa, an underdiagnosed crisis in older adults. Margaret's coffee mug, the one that said, "World's Best Grandma," stopped halfway to her lips. 1 in 100 people have this. Emma clicked to the next screen, not looking at Margaret directly. "Most go undiagnosed for 7 years. 7 years, Grandma, because doctors dismiss it as boils or blame it on hygiene." Numbers filled the screen, percentages and statistics, treatment options and bullet points. Emma's voice stayed steady, like she was practicing for class. "My professor, Dr. Patricia Morrison, she's a dermatologist who teaches our clinical rotation. Her mother had HS." Click. A photograph of a woman about Margaret's age wearing a sleeveless dress at what looked like a garden party. She hid it for 10 years until Patricia figured it out. Margaret set down her mug. The ceramic made that little tap on the Formica. "Her mother thought she was protecting everyone," Emma continued, eyes still on the screen. "Thought if she kept the pain secret, it wouldn't burden the family. But keeping pain secret doesn't make it smaller." Emma reached for her coffee. "Just makes it lonelier." She closed the computer, pulled out 3 medical journals from her bag, set them on the table between them like a peace offering. "These are from the medical library. Thought you might find them interesting." Emma stood, started repacking her bag. "I should go study." Margaret's eyes fell to the journals. Yellow sticky notes stuck out from the pages. The top one in Emma's printing, page 47, New Biologics, 70% improvement rate. "Emma, I'll come by Thursday. Mom mentioned you need groceries." After the door closed, Margaret picked up the first journal. The American Journal of Dermatology, December issue. The sticky note on page 47 marked an article. Adalimumab treatment in elderly HS patients, a breakthrough study. Highlighted in yellow marker, patients reported 60 to 80% reduction in active lesions within 12 weeks. Most significant, dramatic improvement in mobility and daily functioning. Margaret turned to the next marked page, another yellow highlight. The greatest barrier to treatment remains patient shame and physician ignorance. At the bottom of the page, in pencil, Emma had written, "Dr. Morrison takes Medicare. Appointments available. She's expecting your call." Emma's Honda Civic sat idling in Margaret's driveway, exhaust making white clouds in the February cold. Margaret stood at her front door, hand on the deadbolt she'd turned 3 times already. Locked, unlocked, locked again. The appointment card in her coat pocket read, February 5th, 2:30 p.m., Dr. Patricia Morrison, Northwestern Dermatology. Her flip phone buzzed. Text from Emma. "I'm here when you're ready." Margaret had called to cancel twice. Yesterday at 4 o'clock, the receptionist had sounded tired, mentioned a $50 cancellation fee. This morning at 8, hung up before anyone answered. She opened the door. Emma sat with the heat running, reading one of her textbooks. Not honking, not waving. Just waiting, like Frank used to when Margaret took too long getting ready for church. The car's heated seats burned through Margaret's wool coat. Emma had already adjusted the passenger side to the lowest setting. Somehow she knew heat made it worse. "Seatbelt," Emma said, pulling out of the driveway onto Maple Street. Margaret reached across with her left hand, struggling with the angle. The belt wouldn't pull smooth. Emma didn't help, didn't watch, just turned the radio to WGN where they were discussing the weather. Northwestern Dermatology smelled like lavender hand lotion and that antiseptic they'd used since the 60s. Emma had brought a textbook, Pathophysiology of Integumentary Disorders, but wasn't reading it, just holding it closed on her lap. "Margaret Walsh?" Dr. Patricia Morrison stood in the doorway. 52, according to the website Emma had bookmarked on the computer. Silver hair cut short, like Katharine Hepburn in those old movies. No makeup. Blue blouse under her white coat, sensible shoes like the ones nurses wore at the Methodist hospital. The exam room had a real cushioned table, not that crinkly paper. Dr. Morrison washed her hands at the sink, long and thorough, the way Margaret had been taught in home economics class back in 1959. "Your granddaughter says you've been dealing with this for 2 years. Margaret's throat closed. Emma had called ahead, prepared the ground like Frank preparing his garden beds. "Since my husband died. Frank. Maybe before. I don't..." The words came out jagged. "I don't remember exactly when it started." "Trauma and HS often go together," Dr. Morrison said, drying her hands on paper towels. "Grief, stress, major life changes. They trigger the immune system in ways we're just beginning to understand." She sat on the rolling stool, pulled it close, knee to knee with Margaret, like they were having coffee at the church social. "I need to examine you, but we'll go at your pace. You show me what you're comfortable with today." Margaret's fingers fumbled with the buttons. 3, then 4. Her hands shook on the 5th. "That's enough for now." Dr. Morrison leaned forward with a magnifying glass with a light attached. "How many other areas are affected?" 7, maybe 8. "Tumbling?" Margaret nodded. "Daily drainage?" "Yes." Dr. Morrison set down the magnifying glass, looked Margaret straight in the eye. "Mrs. Walsh, this is hidradenitis suppurativa. It's not boils. It's not poor hygiene. It's not your weight. It's a chronic inflammatory condition, and it is absolutely not your fault." Margaret's vision went blurry. She blinked hard, fast, the way she had at Frank's funeral when the organ played Amazing Grace. "You've probably been told to lose weight, wash more, stop shaving." Dr. Morrison's voice carried controlled anger. "All nonsense. This is a disease of the immune system, same as rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, not a character flaw." She turned to her computer, typing as she talked. "We're starting doxycycline, a proper dose this time, not that useless amount they gave you at the ER. But the real treatment is adalimumab. It's a biologic medication, an injection every 2 weeks." "Injection? Your granddaughter is in nursing school?" Dr. Morrison glanced at the door where Emma waited. "She can administer them at home if you're comfortable. Otherwise, you come here." She printed several pages, handed them to Margaret. Proper wound care instructions. These new dressings won't stick to raw areas. There's a medical supply company that delivers, takes Medicare. Margaret scanned the pages, terms she recognized from those late-night computer searches, but explained, plain and simple. Many of my older patients have been dismissed for years, Dr. Morrison continued, told they're exaggerating, that it's just age. It's not. You deserve treatment. You deserve to be without pain. Margaret's left hand gripped the papers. The other doctors said. The other doctors were wrong. In the car, Emma drove 3 blocks before speaking. The pharmacy has the prescription ready. We can… Now. Margaret's voice sounded different, decided. Let's get it now. At home, Emma helped organize the supplies in Frank's study. Non-stick dressings, medical tape that wouldn't pull, a red sharps container for the injection needles. I watched training videos, Emma said, labeling boxes with her label maker. Practiced on oranges in skills lab. Margaret picked up the adalimumab pamphlet. Side effects ran 2 pages, small print like the phone book. We'll monitor everything, Emma said. Blood work every 3 months. Dr. Morrison explained the protocol. That night, Margaret sat at the computer, the HS support group page still bookmarked from November. She typed slowly. Hello, my name is Margaret. I'm 67 years old. I was diagnosed today after 2 years of hiding. My granddaughter is helping me. I don't know what else to say except I'm scared and relieved and confused all at once. She stared at the cursor, blinking. Then a message popped up in the corner of the screen. Someone named Dorothy Williams. Margaret, I lead the in-person support group. Would you like to meet for coffee first? Just the 2 of us? I've been where you are. The church basement smelled like Maxwell House coffee and old hymnals. That particular mixture of must and floor wax that every Lutheran basement had smelled like since Eisenhower was president. St. Mark's Lutheran. Same building where they'd held Frank's service 2 years back. Margaret stood at the top of the stairs, hand tight on the wooden railing Frank had helped install during the 1987 renovation. 7 metal folding chairs arranged in a circle below. 5 already occupied. The fluorescent lights buzzed with that 60-cycle hum, but warmer, somehow, than the hospital. Yellowed plastic covers instead of harsh white. You must be Margaret. The woman at the bottom of the stairs wore a short-sleeved blouse that showed arms with healed scars. Dorothy Williams, 68, according to her message. She climbed halfway up to meet Margaret, moving easy despite a slight limp. Emma called to make sure we'd have space, Dorothy said. She sounds like a treasure. She called? Just checking the address, making sure you'd have close parking. Very thorough. Reminds me of my granddaughter. She's at DePaul studying pharmacy. Margaret descended 1 step, then another. Her right hand stayed pressed against her side, where the morning's injection site still throbbed. 3rd dose of adalimumab, administered by Emma in the kitchen at 7:30. The circle had 2 empty chairs. Dorothy took one, patted the other. Margaret sat slowly, keeping her back straight to avoid pressure. Everyone, this is Margaret, first time with us. Nods around the circle. A man in a Cardinals cap, maybe 60. A woman in scrubs with Memorial Hospital badge still clipped on. A younger woman, 40 at most, with scarring visible on her neck. A grandmother type with knitting in her lap. Looked like dishcloths, the kind Margaret used to make. A woman Margaret recognized from the newspaper's election coverage, Judge Helen Patterson from Circuit Court. We don't do formal introductions unless you want, Dorothy said. Just share when you're ready. The man in the Cardinals cap was talking about an infection that landed him in intensive care last month. The nurse nodded along, mentioned similar experiences with sepsis. The judge talked about missing court sessions, making excuses about food poisoning. Margaret's hands twisted the handles of her purse, the black leather one Frank bought her at Marshall Field's before they closed. The grandmother set down her knitting needles. 20 years I hid it. 20 years. My daughter's a dermatologist. Can you imagine? Her laugh had sharp edges. She went into skin conditions to help people, and I couldn't tell her I needed help. What changed? The younger woman asked. My granddaughter, 12 years old, found me crying in the bathroom. The pain was so bad I couldn't zip my dress for church. Know what she said? The woman's voice cracked. She said, "Grandma, secrets make you sick." Simple as that. Out of the mouths of babes. Margaret's chest got tight. She pressed her left hand against her sternum, felt her heart beating fast under the polyester. Dorothy turned to her. "Margaret, would you like to share? No pressure." The words sat heavy on her tongue. 6 faces waited without expectation, nobody checking watches or shifting in seats. "My husband died 2 years ago." Her voice came out thin. "Frank, pancreatic cancer. The HS started right after, maybe during. Those last months were—" She stopped, swallowed. "I was so focused on Frank's treatments, his medications, I ignored my own body." Nods around the circle. The nurse leaned forward slightly. "After he passed, I told myself the pain was grief, physical manifestation. That's what the grief books called it. Normal." Margaret's fingers found the edge of her cardigan. "So I hid it. Black clothes to hide stains. Missed Sunday dinners because I couldn't lift my arms to pass the green beans. Canceled Christmas for the first time since 1965. To protect them?" Dorothy asked quietly. Margaret nodded. "Frank was gone. If I got sick too, really sick, what would that do to my children? They'd already lost their father." "But hiding sickness doesn't make it disappear," the judge said. "Just makes you face it alone." Margaret looked at her wedding ring. The tiny diamond caught the fluorescent light. "My granddaughter figured it out. She's in nursing school. Researched for months without telling me. Made the appointment. Drove me there when I tried to cancel 3 times. That's love," Dorothy said simply. "Is it?" Margaret's voice broke. "Or did I force a 22-year-old into being my caretaker? She should be worrying about term papers and that boy from her anatomy class, not her grandmother's medical conditions." Dorothy leaned forward. "My therapist told me something. She said hiding our pain from people who love us isn't protection, it's theft." Margaret's head came up sharp. "We steal their chance to love us completely, to be who they want to be, helpful, caring, present." Dorothy's scarred arms rested easy on her knees. "Your granddaughter didn't research HS because you forced her. She did it because loving you is part of who she is. You hiding from her was taking away part of her identity." The heating system clicked on, warm air flowing through the vents that Frank had helped clean during the church workday every fall. Something shifted in Margaret's chest. Not the physical pain she'd grown used to, but something deeper. Frank would have been furious about her suffering alone, would have given her that look over his reading glasses. "I need to tell my family," she said. "All of them." "It's hard," the grandmother said. "But that little girl was right. Secrets do make you sick. Truth lets people love you better." Margaret stood. 3 hours, longest she'd sat upright in months. "Thank you, all of you." Dorothy handed her a mimeographed sheet. "Meeting times, phone numbers. We have a prayer chain too if you want." Walking to her car, Margaret pulled out her phone. The family group chat showed 17 messages about Easter planning. She typed, "I need to tell you all something important. Can everyone come for dinner Sunday?" She stared at the send button, then noticed Emma's car in the church lot, 3 spaces over. Her granddaughter visible in the driver's seat, textbook propped on the steering wheel, waiting in case Margaret needed her. The purple binder lay open between them. 3 months of Emma's research spread across the coffee table Frank had built in his workshop. But now Margaret understood. Every highlighted article, every tab, every handwritten note represented hours Emma had spent hunched over library tables after her clinical rotations ended at 10 o'clock. "You did all this during winter break?" Margaret touched a printout dated January 3rd. The paper was soft from handling, coffee stain on the corner. "And night shifts at the dorm, lunch breaks between classes?" Emma shrugged, but her eyes stayed fixed on Margaret's face, watching. "Started researching when you canceled Thanksgiving." Margaret traced her finger along Emma's penciled notes in the margins. Called office January 15th. Accepts Medicare. Another. Dr. B. New surgical technique, less invasive. And support group leader Dorothy. Very kind on phone. Lost husband, too. This one. Emma pointed to a highlighted name. Dr. James Brennan at Rush Medical. He pioneered a surgical technique for severe tunneling, much less tissue removal than traditional surgery. Margaret read Emma's note beneath. Already spoke to scheduling. First available March 18th, 7:30 a.m. The teacup on the side table had gone cold. Earl Grey with too much sugar, the way Frank made it when she had the flu. Your mother and dad, do they know you did all this? Not yet. Emma closed one of the medical journals. Wanted to talk to you first, make sure you were ready. Margaret's left hand found Emma's. Her granddaughter's fingers were cold. Had been cold this whole time she'd been sitting here. How long have you been sitting in your car outside during my appointments? Emma's face flushed pink. Since February, in case you needed. Every appointment? Yes. 6 weeks later, Margaret arranged metal folding chairs in the library's community room, the same room where she'd read Make Way for Ducklings to 3-year-olds for 30 years. 20 chairs today. Dorothy had spread the word through her church circle and the library's bulletin board. She wore a coral blouse from Penny's spring catalog, not black. The surgical drains Dr. Brennan had placed 2 weeks ago had been removed yesterday. The incision lines were healing pink and clean. Emma sat in the back corner with her laptop computer, typing steadily. Her senior thesis? Breaking the Silence: How Intergenerational Advocacy Transforms Chronic Illness Outcomes. Dr. Morrison had agreed to supervise after reading Emma's research. First attendees arrived at 6:45. Barbara, 71, had seen Margaret's notice in the church bulletin. She pulled up her sleeve, showed Margaret an inflamed area near her elbow. My doctor says it's eczema, but I've been reading those pamphlets you left at the senior center. Margaret handed her Dr. Morrison's business card. Call tomorrow morning. Tell the receptionist I referred you. By 7 o'clock, all 20 chairs were filled. Margaret stood at the front, same spot where she'd once acted out Goldilocks with hand puppets. Welcome to Hidden Health, Chronic Illness Support for Seniors. Her voice carried without the microphone. I'm Margaret Walsh. 2 months ago, I couldn't lift my arms above my waist. I hid my condition for 2 years, told myself I was protecting my family. She touched the collar of her coral blouse. A small drainage pad was visible at the neckline. She didn't adjust the fabric to hide it. My granddaughter saw through my lies. She researched in secret, found doctors who would listen, drove me to appointments when I tried to cancel. Margaret's eyes found Emma in the back. She taught me that hiding pain doesn't protect anyone, makes the pain bigger. After the meeting, Susan helped stack chairs while Michael collected the coffee cups. They'd started coming 3 weeks ago, after Margaret's Sunday dinner confession. Susan had cried. Michael had been angry, not at Margaret, but at the doctors who dismissed her. Mother, your color's better, Susan said, folding the last chair. You look alive? I was going to say younger, but yes, alive. Sunday afternoon, Margaret and Emma planted burpy big boy tomato seedlings in Frank's raised beds. The sun warmed Margaret's forearms. No cardigan needed. The surgical sites pulled slightly when she dug, but Dr. Brennan said that was normal healing. Same variety Grandpa grew, Emma said, reading the plant tag. Found his seed catalog in the garage, from 1995. He'd circled these in red pen. They worked steadily, Emma asking about Frank's method for staking, Margaret demonstrating the proper depth, second set of leaves below soil level. The purple binder sat on the porch table, pages fluttering in the breeze. Some medical articles had dirt smudges now. The adalimumab is working, Emma observed. Your range of motion is almost normal. 70% reduction in active lesions. Margaret quoted Dr. Morrison's assessment. She says I'm her best responder over 65. Margaret looked at the garden, the house, her granddaughter's face in the afternoon light. Frank would be relieved. He always said she was too stubborn for her own good. The purple binder caught a gust of wind. Neither moved to close it. No longer evidence of secrets, simply proof that love finds a way. I need to tell you what happened after. 3 women from our library group got properly diagnosed because Margaret shared her story. Dorothy and Margaret now run support groups in 4 libraries across Cook County. Emma graduated last May. Her thesis won the Dean's Award, and Dr. Morrison hired her for the dermatology clinic. But here's what matters most. Last week, a 73-year-old man named Robert came to the group. He'd been hiding HS for 15 years. His grandson, inspired by Emma's thesis published in the medical journal, drove him there. When Robert rolled up his sleeves and showed his scars, nobody looked away. We looked at each other and saw ourselves reflected. Not broken, but breaking free. Frank would say Margaret turned pain into purpose. I say Emma turned love into action, and that action rippled outward like stones in a pond. Their support groups aren't just about HS anymore. They're about the courage to be seen, the grace to see others, and the truth that healing happens in community, not isolation. Disclaimer: this is a work inspired by real medical experiences, created solely for entertainment and educational purposes. This story does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of self-harm, medical negligence, or avoiding professional health care. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental.